In power scaling, there's a lot of things that come down to the interpretation of the person consuming the media when they scale the character. An excellent example of this is in Dragon Ball Z with the Otherworld dimension. See, guidebooks say that it's beyond space and time, despite the fact that the show clearly shows that it has both space and time. But then we'll have people that interpret this statement as the most chaotic thing possible. See, because Otherworld has infinite space, any space in it must be infinite between the 2 points. Taking one step there, that would be an infinite distance. Flying to one place to another, infinite distance. Sometimes in a series, this isn't actually a problem. But in the case of Dragon Ball Z, it's basically a retcon of the drama that fuels the Saiyan saga. Goku only has a year to cross 1,000,000 miles of Snake Way and train with King Kai before the Saiyans show up. And if Otherworld doesn't even have time like he says later in the series, this drama shouldn't exist at all. Goku should just be done training at the same exact time that he died. But how does my interpretation rant tie into Elden Ring? A lot of the narrative in Elden Ring also comes down to interpretation. So you have a hobby that takes the interpretation of someone consuming the media, and a series that's narrative is also fueled by interpretation. Considering both of those things come down to interpretation, you can get vastly different scales for characters' powers that no one can agree on. But some of these interpretations are just annoying to me. Sure, we have the most infamous example of Radahn halting the stars, when the definition of stars in Elden Ring is nebulous. Stars could range from anything from meteoroids to actual stars to outer gods to fate to giant eldritch bug monsters to amber that contains life. But the in-lore nebulous definition of stars isn't even the worst part of this. Trying to determine just how much Radahn is affecting probably is. Is he just affecting meteoroids? Is he just affecting all the stars that we can see? Is he affecting everything in the galaxy? Is he affecting everything in the universe? Is he matching the gravitational binding energy of each and every star that he's halting? How did he even stop the stars? Did he use Starcaller's Call? Did he use Collapsing Star? Did he do some ritual that we don't even know that halts every star as long as he's alive? But then power scalers will also say that Radahn's each and every attack should also match the power of him halting every single star in the universe. So each and every attack that he uses gravity for? Yeah, that's a universe buster apparently. Please ignore that he doesn't even cause a crater when he hits Malenia in the trailer for the game. But then we'll also get some arguments like he was holding back the entire time. Which I guess can make sense against Malenia, but what about the consort fight? There is literally no reason at all for Radahn to be holding back in the consort fight. It's the fight that determines literally everything. At least succeed in destroying the tower or something. You can freaking fly! But power scaling Radahn can get even more ridiculous when people try and calculate his speed. Granted, yes, his Ash of War in the DLC explicitly says that you can reach light speeds with it. It's even called Light Speed Slash. But people unironically will say that base Radahn's speed is far beyond this. And to reach that conclusion, yes, you have to explicitly ignore that the Ash of War says that when using the Ash of War, you gain light speed. You have to ignore that it's Miquella buffing Radahn that lets him hit those light speeds. You have to ignore literally everything that you see, everything the Ash of War is explicitly telling you, to say that Radahn is beyond light speed. And usually the justifications for base Radahn being light speed or higher are just dumb. One argument I remember really well is that Radahn has to be light speed or higher to halt all of the stars in the galaxy because stars are light speed. Please ignore that no star is light speed, or that he must have light speed attacks because he has to launch Collapsing Star at a star to halt its movement. That argument is better, but the Carians could chart where stars were going anyways. Not to mention that Radahn's mom is an astrologer, who works with other astrologers, and Radahn studied at the school where they teach explicitly about stars and other celestial bodies. Theoretically, Radahn could just calculate where he needs to shoot the thing. He wouldn't need a light speed attack, he'd just need to point it in the right direction and fire it. But enough about Radahn for now. Let's go to Malenia. All of that light speed stuff and universe busting stuff also transfers over to Malenia because she was able to equally match base Radahn. Now you could probably see Radahn crushing the universe, he has gravity magic after all, but Malenia not so much. Especially if you buy the Radahn is holding back argument. Malenia's ultimate attack just nuked a continent, and I've seen one Japanese translation of Waterfowl Dance that said it's explicitly hypersonic speeds. I got no idea where I found that, and I can't find it again, so if you're able to, please confirm if that's true. Granted, she is basically the avatar of the Outer God of Rot, but the Outer God of Rot was also stopped by a blind swordsman who was just dancing. But we could scale Malenia off of attacks that she can dodge that we as the player can do, like lightning bolts. Which means she should be able to dodge Lightspeed Slash, right? Well, she can't actually dodge it. I tested it dozens of times and she could not dodge it once. The idea that Malenia can destroy a star is also kind of funny to me because Scarlet Rot is explicitly stopped by fire. I don't really care where you scale these characters, just acknowledge that the interpretation of how they're scaled varies from person to person. Now on to Godfrey, the dude who can suplex fire giants and cause eruptions by punching the ground. People will scale this guy to solar system to universal levels. The reasons being is because he's the Elden Lord and thus must be stronger than Radahn. But this also presupposes that Radahn is a universe buster anyways. But this also ignores that Godfrey was killed by random ass mobs during his exile. So please explain to me how a universe buster got killed by some random people that we don't even know. And then there's people that will scale him to the Elden Beast despite the fact he never even fought it. Reason being is that Marika brought him to the end of the game so that he could fight the Elden Beast. And that she apparently picked him over us because Grace guides him towards us. And where do people put his speed? Immeasurable. I'll get into that explanation in a minute, but this dude took literally the entire game to show up. Are you really going to say that he has immeasurable speed? Anyways, what's the justification for him having immeasurable speed? Now we get into the biggest elephant in the room in power scaling Elden Ring. Enter Placidusax. The seat of the Dragon Lord lies in the storm beyond time. Additionally, Placidusax scales can twist time. So what do power scalers do? Because the storm is beyond time, anything that can move there must also be beyond time. So did you bring a rock with you? That rock now has immeasurable speed. Did you bring any summons with you? Every single summon Ash in the game now has immeasurable speed. And I hate this part of power scaling Elden Ring so much because it just makes everything stupid. People will also argue that this makes Bale have immeasurable speed, despite the fact that Bale probably never even fought Placidusax in this storm beyond time. Not to mention there's an active day and night cycle on the way up to Bale while he's shooting lightning at us. But because Bale is in the DLC, people will unironically scale almost every boss in the DLC to him. Mesmer now has immeasurable speed, Consort Radahn now has immeasurable speed, Rellana now has immeasurable speed, Midra immeasurable speed, and the most hilarious example, Egon, who now has immeasurable speed and universe level durability because he could tank Bale ripping him to shreds. And Bale gets those because he fought Placidusax and ripped off 3 of his heads. Then we get into the guidebook stuff. There's a third-party guidebook for Shadow of the Erdtree. This set of guidebooks was not written by From Software and even has incorrect information in the lore section, specifically around Godfrey, which makes taking information from it dubious at best. But this guidebook also unironically says that when we fight Bale in Phase 2, he's at his prime power. Please ignore Bale is missing various limbs. But because the guidebook says this, people will use this to justify Bale scaling to prime Placidusax. And thus the DLC bosses also scaling to prime Placidusax. Which is how we somehow get Consort Radahn not being light speed but having immeasurable speed, or in some arguments that I've run across, a higher form of faster than light speeds. That's not a thing that exists. But let's go back to base game for a moment. Another egregious example I'm familiar with is Ranni creating her own dimension, which people use to make Ranni be universal levels. Now, I'll agree that at the end of the game, Ranni could be universal levels, but when we're fighting her spell of Rennala, no. Because the quote dimension that Ranni manifests in Rennala's Phase 2 has stars in the background, people have used this to justify that Ranni has universal level scaling, ignoring the fact that it could all just be an illusion, or the fact that you can create a false starry sky like what we see in Nokron. But then people will also use this to justify Rennala having universal level scaling, for the same exact reasons, even though we're not fighting Rennala. It's a summon of her made by Ranni. Speaking of Nokron, where do the Estelles scale? Well, they destroyed several cities, so city level is a bare minimum. But because they're in lore described as malformed stars, people have unironically given them star level scaling. I've also seen people extend this to the Falling Star Beast. And then I've seen people unironically use this to justify the planet having star level durability. because it can survive an impact from the falling star beast and the Estelles. Yeah, star level planet. It makes sense. Sure. But probably the most egregious arguments I've come across are the dimensional scaling arguments. I can accept that some characters in Elden Ring could reach universal levels, those being at least Elden Beast and maybe Marika, specifically in their prime, ergo not when we fight them. But then we get into the dimensional scaling arguments. And wouldn't you know it, this ties back around to Placidusax Storm again, because the storm is beyond time. Because the storm is beyond time, that must mean that it's a 4-dimensional space. Or in some people's arguments, a 5-dimensional one because it's beyond time. Then, because Placidusax couldn't find his god in this place beyond time, outer gods must be a higher dimensional tier. Even though that kinda just ignores the fact that Placidusax is just waiting for his god. He's like perpetually on hold on a phone call. But because people are applying this scaling to Placidusax, they're also going to apply it to Bale, which means they're going to apply it to all the DLC bosses again. Which is how we somehow ended up with 60 Miquella and Radahn. Not to mention that there's an argument that some people present that everything in Elden Ring should be 4-dimensional. This being due to the fact that every single enemy in the game can interact with the Tarnished, who has weapons that are forged with ancient dragon smithing stones, which twist time. And then of course, chain scaling every single enemy in the game to the Tarnished also means that every single thing in the game has a measurable speed. Hopefully you can see how ridiculous this is getting. Fear the 4th-dimensional universe-busting rats that move beyond the speed of time. While on the topic of the universe tiering stuff in Elden Ring, the Elden Ring. The Erd Tree is a manifestation created by the Elden Ring, which is influenced by the runes in it. Because the Erd Tree is pretty much directly connected to the Elden Ring, and the Elden Ring governs all aspects of reality, the Erd Tree must also have universal level durability. This means that the Giant's Fell Flame and Malenia must be universal levels because they can burn it. And while on the topic of the Elden Ring, the weirdness that comes with scaling the Elden Ring. Other than the Rune of Death, we really don't know what most of the other runes that make up the Elden Ring even do. Granted, we can get some hint from the abilities that we get from using the Great Runes, but really only the Rune of Death is the one we absolutely know what it does. Regardless, because the Golden Order was built on the laws of causality and regression, some people have taken this to mean that Marika with the Elden Ring was capable of reversing causality. But if that's the case, how the hell did Godwyn get murdered anyways? If she's capable of controlling the aspect of causality, can't she just, like, reverse that? Hell, better yet, go all the way back to when the shaman were getting genocided and stop that. You know, the inciting incident for all of Elden Ring. Oh, but we're still not done with the dubious scaling of the Elden Ring itself. Because the Elden Ring is the concepts that govern reality, which means it must be the Platonic concepts, which means that the Elden Ring is outerversal levels of scaling. Please ignore the fact you can change the runes in the Elden Ring, which means it's not very Platonic. And thus, we now somehow have outerversal Radahn from that ridiculous scaling. But wait, it doesn't end there, because the fragments of the Elden Ring should also have outerversal scaling by some people's logic. Good job, we just made outerversal Godric. I couldn't really figure out where to put this last part in, so I'm just throwing it in at the end. Some people have also scaled Rykard to Malekith. You know, the guy that every single demigod fears. The guy that's made specifically to kill Marika if she steps out of line. The guy who killed an Empyrean in the lore, or at least defeated her. The guy who literally wields the concept of death. The guy who literally every single demigod fears. Reason being that some people say that he scales to Malekith is because he has the Blasphemous Claw, which, yes, is a direct counter to the Black Blade, but Rykard doesn't even have it anymore. Bernal pretty much took it for himself. Even with that though, would you say someone that has the perfect counter to someone directly scales to them? Because if you're participating in power scaling and you say that Batman scales to Superman just because he can beat him with a kryptonite weapon, that's probably gonna start a huge argument, isn't it? But if just having Destined Death was enough to scale you up to Malekith, why did any of the Black Knives die after their assault on Godwyn? Because, you know, that's exactly Tish's lore. She got killed while they were running away after killing Godwyn. Wait, I got one more. Alexander the Jar Warrior directly scales to Radahn. Why? Because he survived a hit from Radahn, who has universal scaling. So, Alexander has universal durability. Yay! And that's about everything I could think to rant about within like 2 hours I think it took me to record this. I can buy universe level scaling for the top of the verse in Elden Ring, but beyond that, no. Except for maybe Hailstorm, but he's in Night Rain. Hell, I could even buy 4th dimensional for some of the characters. So if you've enjoyed this rant about the arguments I've run into while power scaling Elden Ring, like the video so more people can see it. Goodbye.